Hey, what's going on, Good Network? It is Lucky, and today we're going to bring you the story of Kelsee Reed and her family. Now, the story we're going to talk about does have to do with mental health, and it will touch on suicide. Those are very sensitive topics, so just to let you know up front, we will be providing a list of resources if you are going through mental health struggles and resources on how you can help Kelsee and her family. Well, first, I wanted to thank you for coming down. Real quick, when I saw your story and reached out to you, there's a little bit of hesitation. And usually when I reach out to somebody, I'm like, hey, let's do this. Let's raise some money. There's a need there. I felt like there was a little bit of hesitation on your part. And then you came forward and said, yeah, I'm willing to do it, but I want to do it to raise awareness for mental health. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't about fundraising or anything, which I'm sure there's a need for that. But I just wanted to say, I think that says just a ton about you and in your situation. So thank you for coming and doing this with us.
Yeah. I think that just sharing our story, if it could help one other person, I totally thought I wasn't going to cry.
It's okay.
Then it's worth it, to share it and to be vulnerable. And so that's why I wanted to come out here. I really want to be involved and be advocating for other people and turn something that's so tragic into maybe just a little glimpse of good. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the good.
Yeah.
Tell me about Jason. Tell me about the kind of person he was. Tell me why you loved him. Just teach me.
Yeah. So me and Jason first met at church, and Jason was just very eccentric, I guess, but super into electronic music. So they used to do these sober kind of raves, and
a sober rave?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But he was super, they were into DJing and all this stuff, but Jason would dance around, and he's super big. He was 6'2" or something like that, but he was just really muscular and not the stereotypical rave kind of person, but He'd be dancing and he'd just be
just getting into it.
Just getting it. And you could see that he just radiated joy and was a really passionate and just extraordinary person, just a heart of gold. And I know, especially after somebody passes away, people say that kind of stuff, but truly everybody who encountered Jason felt loved and felt like they were embraced, and he just wanted to love people,
Tell me about the proposal. I saw pictures on your Facebook page of your wedding day. Tell me about the proposal and that moment where it all happened.
Well, me and Jason are kind of awkward people, and so that translated even into our personal relationship. But I think that's something that I really treasure because that was our authentic selves. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But so the first time I met Jason, he commented on my hair because it's naturally curly. And I was just oh, thank you. And I ran off, just really embarrassed or put off kind of. Yeah. But that didn't deter Jason. He really pursued me and wanted me to feel special. And he proposed to me in the Garden of Glow at the Botanical Gardens. And just like I was saying, he's kind of awkward, so I knew something was going on. Yeah. But it was still really romantic, and I was super shocked because he's very manly man, he was in construction and he was weightlifting and just but when he proposed to me and I saw the ring, it was something that I would have picked.
Right. He knew you. He knew what you wanted.
Yeah, he did. And that's one thing where I think when you lose your significant other or your spouse, he knew me and he knew all these parts of me that nobody else did, Yeah. And so, and I think that's still something that that's so special to me, even though he's not here,
Tell me about Jason the father. Like I said, I've seen pictures. You have beautiful children.
Yeah.
Tell me about him as a dad.
So Jason was definitely the fun dad, definitely the one he would come home and everything, all of his attention would be on the kids. And he always talked so highly of the kids, like to everybody. He always told everyone how amazing our kids were. And he loved them more than anything. And like he really just like was intentional with what he did with our kids.
So I'm hearing this quirky, EDM loving, manly man, good dad.
Yeah.
Right? All these great things. He obviously loved you, very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, we want to talk about mental health.
Yeah.
So if somebody's watching this and maybe going through struggles or in a relationship with somebody who they think might be going through mental health issues, can you specify a time or an event or a trigger that maybe started some of the pain, the mental health pain, or like what was where did it all start, I guess is my question.
So for Jason, with his mental health and what he was struggling with, I think a lot of it came back to like his identity and his self-worth, essentially. And, he had some like OCD type of tendencies with wanting to make sure that he was good enough specifically for God because of, like that specific type of OCD that I truly believe he had. But I think that if you're in a relationship, this is like one of the things that I really learned that I wish I would have done sooner, but just like talking to people who are safe about it and talking to people who you can trust to help you in the situation, like your own counselor or, I don't know, it's just so hard though, because like an adult, is like responsible for themselves.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, I feel like I maybe didn't share enough with other people who cared about us when I should have to protect his integrity. Do you know what I mean?
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard I'd imagine with something so personal too, it'd be hard to share. And I think there's this thing with men, in today's society, and there is more people like you coming to step up to talk about mental health and making it an issue. But I do think overall with men, there's almost this like macho, we can't talk about our feelings or, we have to suck it up and, be men. And I think that can weigh on a person. I want to ask, looking back, do you remember, obviously you knew him different than anybody else. Some of his friends might be watching now. Were there any signs that you saw him display that maybe got worse over time? Any indications that, he was going through a mental health decline?
I think the first and like the most major one was that he pushed away. He started to like push away close friends and isolate.
Really?
And and that was like looking back, something that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
Was that isolation for him. He felt like, I think that he was paranoid, but he felt like people were against him and that, his friends were talking bad about him. And so he would just like stop talking to people. But it turned out in the end to just like, he completely like shut everybody out. So, I think that was a huge thing that was like a number one sign was the isolation thing.
Is there anything that you think could have, obviously talking and expressing, but is there anything that you look back and say, this one thing could have helped, or we should have done this differently, as you saw the progression happen? Is there anything like that maybe you feel could have changed? Yeah,
I think that seeing a mental health professional sooner.
Really?
Yeah, would have been life-changing, would have been like, that would have saved him, I feel like. Doing talk therapy and being able to really talk through what was going on in his head and starting that when things were really starting to decline And that was like 3 years ago, you know what I mean? And then from there, it just got worse and worse and worse. And so really just like reaching out to resources in the community and being open and vulnerable in that way, and really explaining what you're feeling like on the inside, and not waiting until, like, not thinking that you can fix yourself or that it'll get better, because things don't get better like that. They get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So
you had mentioned 3 years ago, you know, as there's this progression, what was it an all at once kind of decline thing? Like, did you see a starting point and then just mentally kind of go from there? Or was there like peaks and valleys where it'd be kind of hard to distinguish sometimes what's happening?
You know, I think like in the moment, it was like there were peaks and valleys where I was like, oh, okay, you know, maybe it's getting better. You know what I mean? Or, you know, maybe this, because it would be like, everything would be fine, and then all of a sudden this major depressive episode or psychosis or whatever, and so then there'd be that little blip, and then it would get better, and so you're thinking, oh, this is okay, but it was just a cyclical thing. Yeah. But so over time there was a gradual decline, you know what I mean? And that was like gradual, so it wasn't like necessarily overnight. He was like,
was it like a
severe, right? Yeah, it was like a gradual decline, but looking back, I could see that it was an everyday battle where it was like that over and over again behavior just kept on repeating.
Did you, as his partner, his wife, did you ever think that it would lead to where you're at right now?
I think that I knew that. I think that I knew that, but I didn't feel like that was what was going to happen. I felt like we were going to make it through. I mean, even up till the end, like when things were just getting worse, we would talk, and I told him, I promised him, you know, this is going to help. Like, your situation's going to get better. We're going to make it through this. We've been through things 20 times worse than this. Right. You know what I mean? With like the mental health and stuff. And so, I just thought that we were going to make it through and we were going to be able to figure it out. Right.
If you're okay, I want to ask about your kids and handling, like, where you're at today, right? You have beautiful children. Yeah. And one of the things, you know, as we were talking before we sat down, you were telling me is like life doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. So you're going through this horribly tragic event. You lost your partner. You have children of your own, and life doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. How are you handling it with your children? Maybe if somebody's watching this that is in the same position of you, what's some advice you could give on how to handle it with kids and just help them through this?
Yeah. So with my two older kids, so I have a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, and then an almost 2-year-old. Yeah. And so with my two older kids, you know, I sat down with them, and my dad was there, and we just, you know, explained to them, you know, Dad's brain was sick, and the doctors did whatever they could to help him. But, you know, he ended up passing away. And so they have that understanding of that, you know, and we had a clear conversation about it. And so they know and they understand that. And for my son, he was really concerned because he wasn't seeing people around him cry. So he was really like, you know, is anybody else sad? You know, he's like, does anyone else miss Dad? You know? And so I think the biggest thing that I took away from that was I needed to be vulnerable in front of him, with him, and go through it with him, and not just be there for him and then kind of go away and process it in my own way. Like me and my 3 kids are walking through it together. And so even my youngest daughter, she's not even 2 yet, but there's things that she does where I'm like, oh, she's understanding that Dad's not coming back. You know, she was watching a Miss Rachel show, and
Miss Rachel.
Yeah, and she was talking about Dad. You know, she kind of goes through sounds of like Dada, Mama. You know, and she was saying Dada, and my daughter looked up at me and she just started crying. You know, and she just like, even at like she'll be 2 in December, so even at her age, she was recognizing that's something that's missing for her. And she was just saying, I want Dada, and she's really leaned into my son. who's 7, and she like will ask for him to hold her or something like that. But I think it's just like really being vulnerable and like as much as is appropriate, being honest, you know, and sharing that. And so, and knowing that like this is a whole process for my entire family, me and my kids, you know? Mm-hmm. And so.
Speaking of being vulnerable, you know, kind of with where you're at, we said life still goes on. Mm-hmm. You still have priorities. You're still raising a family. Hopefully that sharing this story and putting attention on it can get people unified around to help. So yes. Mm-hmm. What, being vulnerable, putting yourself in that spot, I know it's hard to ask, but what are some needs that mm-hmm. you have? How can people help you?
Yeah. I think in this like kind of a traumatic situation where all of a sudden this person who was like the sole provider and he was like everything to us, you know what I mean? And so like that just like being kind of ripped away in a moment. We've had like we live in a really great community and we have so much support, you know what I mean? And like people are available and have been available to us. And so that's been something where I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish Jason could see this, you know, because he was convinced that nobody cared about him, you know what I mean? And so that's something that I really appreciate is just like people being there. But I also think like even outside of monetary things, like I just don't want anyone to forget about him, you know, and I want him to make a positive impact in the world.
I think one last thing, hopefully, you know, the reason we're doing this and we agreed is to shed some light on mental health and people going through that. So if you could say anything to somebody that might be in Jason's position mm-hmm. right now as a widower coming in with kids, mm-hmm. you know, on the other side of what happened, what would you tell them right now?
So Jason was convinced that he didn't matter and that we didn't need him, even though we had so many conversations about how we did need him, you know, and I think every life matters, and I think that you're here for a reason and that you're loved and that you're cared for. And so that's the biggest thing is I just want people to know that they matter and know that they have an impact to make here and that they're needed.